Homeschooling in elementary can be so fun, but it can also be challenging as well. Young children are learning so much for the first time, and every child develops differently. If you're struggling to teach or worried about teaching elementary school, we would love to help you figure it all out. I am Sunny, Sonlight's community manager and a Sonlight mom of 2 children who have been educated since preschool with Sonlight. My youngest is in 2nd grade right now, so we definitely have elementary school students in our home. And I'm being joined today by Amy and Robin. Let's start with some introductions. Amy, do you want to tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Sure, I'm Amy, and I have homeschooled with Sonlight for many, many years now. I have 2 in high school and 1 that is just finishing 5th grade. So I've done elementary in the past, and not too distant past. So that's my elementary expertise is 3 have survived it. So
Well, thank you for being here. Yeah, yeah, so far, right? And Robin, why don't you tell us about yourself?
Hi, I'm Robin, and my oldest is 15. I have a 13-year-old and a 9-year-old. And so we've been homeschooling with Sonlight since, the very beginning. And so there is a lot of experience in terms of the elementary age. But also I was an elementary public school teacher. So I have a little bit of coming from that angle also at home here.
Well, perfect. Thank you both so much for being here. Let's jump right in and talk about how Sonlight makes it easy to teach young kids, because a lot of times this is the first time they're learning, how to read, write, and do everything academically. So how does Sonlight make that easy? And what did you find when you first started teaching your children?
Well, from the non-homeschool or non-public school person, I didn't have the background at all of how to do it. So I have a background in something else entirely and had to start from scratch. So having an instructor's guide was an absolute life-changing thing for me. It is what made it possible for me. So I started with preschool with my oldest now. And so we did, a little simpler version of it than it is now. It's so fun with all that has been added to it even since that time. But just the suggestions that are in it for, ideas for how to approach different learning styles and types. And I felt like the read alouds just made such a difference for any kid to learn and read that, and hear those things and listen that way. And the instructor's guide at every level, I don't know what else to say, but it has so much information that to glean from if you don't already know those things. So I never felt like I was left alone. And then Sonlight is so amazing about that you can contact advisors and get help and tips there if you run into a snag at any point. But so I used all those. I mean, those were my big tools for learning to teach an elementary age kid.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree that, I was a teacher, but teaching your own children at home is entirely different. And I wasn't interested in replicating, the public school experience at all. That wasn't the goal. And so it was a bit of a paradigm shift in terms of figuring out what's going to work here. And I was very much drawn by the literature-based aspect of it in terms of us being able to sit together as a family and spend a large chunk of our day reading great books and learning together. But I don't know that I'm answering your question, but your question was about, what made it more doable. What makes it more doable, I think, for anybody is, again, like Amy said, the instructor's guide, because it's all there. It's open and go. When I was getting paid to plan, that was one thing. But here at home, I didn't have the time for that. And so being able to open an instructor's guide where everything is thought out for me, I don't have to spend Saturdays and Sundays, planning or running here and there for that book or this book and schlepping everybody to the library to gather all the materials. Having everything ready to go means that, my school time hours are spent doing school. And so we grab books, we sit together, I open the IG, and we are off to the races.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It was important to me that if I was going to do this homeschool thing, that I enjoyed what I was teaching. Otherwise, I don't think we would still be here. And so, yeah, like you two, I love to read, and I saw all these great books and thought, well, this looks fun. But I loved the IG aspect of it because I didn't have to figure out, am I going to miss something, or how do I turn this stack of books into an actual curriculum and make sure my kids are learning what they need to, because the instructor's guide already has all that information in there. Also, something that's super helpful, I think, for those more skill-based subjects like language arts, for instance, you don't have to figure out how to teach your child to read because the instructions are in there. You know, today we're learning this letter sound, you know, this is how you write it, this is how you pronounce it, you know, and it builds very gradually. So even those very basic skills that you know how to do but don't really know how to explain, it's all in there. So you can look at that IG and just kind of read through it and then say those things out loud to your kids. So that is my favorite part, that it is so easy. I also love that Sonlight has now added in a lot of hands-on kits and activities to make it even more fun for creative kids. My youngest is super creative, and so having those hands-on things really reinforce learning for him. But let's talk a little bit about learning, especially I think learning to read is one that parents get concerned about because kids do that at such a wide age range. But really anything, pencil grip or any of those types of things, how do you know that your child is within, you know, the appropriate skill level for their age, or when should you start wondering if you really should be concerned that maybe they're not grasping something that you think that age should?
You want to start, Robin?
I can start. So in terms of language arts, because you're right, that is a bit of a daunting task for, I think, probably most, you know, parents of elementary students, because we're really kind of starting from zero and trying to get, you know, to the potential, you know, endpoint of being a proficient reader. But as you mentioned, the instructor's guide has everything planned out. The scope and sequence at the back walks you through all of the things that you're going to be covering over the course of the year. And then in terms of the day-to-day lesson plans, they're very scripted for you. So if you need that much support as a teacher, it's scripted entirely for you. So it's not going to be, you know, a case of, oh, did I forget to this, or what about that, or are we going to hit this? It's all going to be there at some point, and you can check the scope and sequence to verify that. But having the script there, I think, for a beginner parent, or even a parent who's maybe just, you know, slightly distracted, it just makes it so easy to open the guide. In terms of a student that, you know, there may be some concern of whether or not they're on level, I think, what, you know, given the assessments that we have on the website for finding the language arts level, if there was a huge discrepancy in what, you know, between the age and the ability, then I think that, you know, that might be a time to start to concern yourself. But generally at that age, there's such a wide range of when the children are receiving the instruction. You know, if there maybe have been some gaps or some other things that have been going on at home or at previous school settings, that they're coming from such a different base point that their levels are just always different. I mean, my three kids, and they all have this exact same, you know, family, home, and everything, curriculum. And I think most of us can say that there is no one way that they all just went and progressed through it perfectly. That even here in my own home. So I think that we're going to hit all those topics. If we've, you know, gone over something several times and there doesn't seem to be any progress, that might be a time where we back up, we look for some remedial types of activities. But oftentimes those are going to be included. And the way that Sonlight hits everything so progressively, but yet naturally, and without a lot of I always like to say we don't drill and kill them, because that was definitely a thing that we did in school. And so there is never any drill and kill here at home. It's very natural, very gentle. The children are going to enjoy it. So there isn't a whole lot of pushback and reluctance and that type of thing. It just makes it so easy. But then also to see if there may be some issues, it makes it easy to see that, I think.
Well, I'll back up what she said in terms of your kid, in your own home, they're going to do things at different times. And so I have a child that read at 4 and a child that read at 8. And now it's all come out in the wash. Like they both read great. They're in high school, they're fine. So I think there's intuition that plays into it, in addition to, I think exactly what Robin said, of there are times when you need to check. And if you are concerned about what level your child is on, you should check. You should do things like an assessment, or you should talk to people that you trust and kind of see, what their input is. If you want to ask an advisor, you can ask an advisor. But so your intuition plays into it, but there are also things that I think a little bit of patience goes a long way. If your kiddo is having trouble in something, if you are really meeting a battle, stop it and give it a little bit of time. I mean, stop that activity, wait for a month, and then come back to it. And if you have to do it again and wait another month and come back, it's okay. There will come a time when you really are concerned about it, and then address it. But a lot of things, a little bit of patience will change everything about how things are going. So, yeah, I'm trying to think about it. I love in the language arts, there's now a rubric, which is such a great help with that particular skill of being able to kind of see where you are. And again, a little bit of patience. If they're not getting all of those things at the first, just give it a little bit of time. And the next time they'll add a new thing that you can mark off that they did great. So those would be my tips on, the skill-based things. I do think mom's intuition plays into it a lot. But
yeah, I think that's great advice. What you both said too about your kids are all different. This is something that even I was concerned about, because my oldest learned to read very quickly, very easily. She's the type that looks at something and it's memorized. So like even her Bible verses, she learned very quickly. And I assumed, okay, that's what normal kids do. And this is, they all start reading at this time. And then my son was the complete opposite. And yeah, that advice to be patient when your other child did something else. Sometimes it's scary of like, oh my gosh, is this okay? Is he okay? But it was actually in the Facebook Sonlight Connections group and in the app where I saw other parents saying similar things. And Amy, like you said, one child reading at 4, one at 8, that I realized, oh, well, I think he was 6 at the time. And I'm like, he's well within the normal range. And just because he's not his sister doesn't mean he's not going to learn these things. And sure enough, that advice to be patient. And then we actually took him to the eye doctor, and he had some focal issues with his eyes. So sometimes that might be it. If, the child's not reading or has a hard time with it, it's that their eyes are not seeing things correctly. But there was no cause for concern if I had just held on a little bit longer. But I do think that's absolutely normal. If you have questions and you're not sure, definitely reach out to the Sonlight community. Our advisors, they are great at allaying those fears by kind of telling you, oh no, that's perfectly normal, or here's what happened with my kids. And then when you hear those stories, it's like, oh, okay, that's totally fine. But let's talk about choosing those correct levels, because I think sometimes we get so excited and we want to push our kids, to the next level, like, oh, let's go, and you both mentioned kind of slowing things down a little bit. But how do you make sure, initially that you choose a level that's going to be appropriate for that child and you're not pushing too fast? But if you do discover that the child is more advanced and ready to keep going, how do you keep up with them and make sure that the child's enjoying it and you're not lagging behind there?
Well, Robin was mentioning earlier the placement tests online. So if somebody comes into the convention booth, which is often where you find each of us, and ask those questions, that would be my first line of advice, is to go on the Sonlight website, look up the homeschool placement tests, and you get those options for reading, for language arts, and for math, for the different maths that are available. And so that's a great starting place in terms of those skill-based things. Then I think certainly using the age range that is on the different programs will help with a starting guide. And then we go back to, if you can come to a convention and talk to one of the ladies in there, they can certainly help. And then an advisor can help as well if you're struggling with that. Sonlight Connections is so amazing for the new people to kind of figure some of those things out, though if they've already chosen, then they may have to tweak things. But I think that the interest level that your child shows in what you're doing is a good indicator. If they're able to communicate, if they're able to answer, if you want to use the questions that are in the Sonlight Instructor's Guide, just how are they able to communicate what you're learning back and forth? Now, obviously you have unique kids that this would not fit for them, but if they're able to communicate normally and can talk to you about those things, are they getting what you're reading aloud together? Are they able to talk through it? Do they tell, somebody, their siblings about it, or those kind of things can be a good, are we doing what we should be doing?
Yes. And I think, echoing your point earlier about your intuition, if you're reading and spending time with your children, together on the couch, and you're reading something that you think is an appropriate book, but there seems to be, no understanding or very little understanding or lots of confusion, then I think that's an obvious time to, take a step back and evaluate, well, are we just not having an interest in this, or is there a bigger issue that we need to take a look at? This actually happened to me when my oldest was, I guess he was 4, or, just barely 4 maybe. And I wanted to start the pre-K program with him back then. And so I was gung ho about it. I thought this is going to be perfect. And I bought it, and it came, and we began, and it just was not working. I mean, there was very little attention because he was 4 and he was a boy. And so I shelved it, and I ordered the P3, and we did that as bedtime stories. And so that's just an example of some of the times when I've had to readjust, but it's very simple. I could have sent it back. I could have returned it, but I knew I was going to need it, when we finished P3. So I just went ahead and got P3, and we worked on that. It's actually happened again in terms of, I think it was D. Yes, it was our D program. And I thought, same again, let's do this. It's the next logical step. And I didn't shelve it, but I did take my time on it. I took about 1.5 years with that program, purposely for the older, but also for the middle, so that he could age into it. And so it's just very, very flexible with regard to doing those types of things. There wasn't anybody knocking on my door, asking, hey, what page are you on in the guide? And so very, very easy to just either take a step back or take it a little slower.
Well, I would love to confirm that, because that's exactly what I do. And it was with D. We did D and E over 3 years for the same reason. I needed the other ones to catch up, and it worked. Everybody else was like, we were just all happier, right?
Exactly.
It's just happier. And doing the 2 of those over 3 years, it was the perfect flexibility. So I love hearing that she did that. We had the same experience. And I think whatever level it is, that's the beauty of that. You can do that and adjust those things. And you're not holding your kid back. You're not, you may plug right away with math, but you needed to slow down the reading. It's very flexible. And that's one of its great beauties, I think.
Yeah, there's nothing that says, oh, this level has to be used in a year. I think sometimes we get hung up on, oh, it's written for 36 weeks. I have to do it in 36 weeks in this school year. But yeah, if you find that it's going too fast, slow it down a little bit. Or Sonlight carries 4-day versus 5 days. So maybe you're doing 5-day and that's too much work for where your child's at, drop down to a 4-day or stretch it out. Also, as far as like a kid that is super advanced and wants more, I mean, anytime that has been the case, like if my kids want more books to read, we just go to the library and we get more books for them to read, as opposed to pushing forward in their, Sonlight program or their level, because you do have to be aware as kids get older, the books get more challenging as far as the subject matters, not just reading levels and things like that. So if your child isn't quite at that emotional maturity level yet to move up, find other books. A lot of our Sonlight books are part of a series. So we love to, if we loved this book, we'll go get the other books in the series from the library. And that supplements, for my child who is a voracious reader, to make sure that, we're still doing stuff and keeping it engaged, but it's okay if it's still kind of easy, some of the schoolwork, because you don't want to burn them out. And I know just the amount of things that I have learned doing Sonlight with my kids. I feel like I didn't learn anything in my own childhood. So, I mean, they are still learning, and there is so much great information in these Sonlight books. So absolutely, it's easy to adjust to their pace. Now let's talk a little bit about, oftentimes, if you've got at least one elementary school student, maybe more than one, you probably have some younger siblings in the mix as well, or you may at some point, in whether that be toddlers, babies, both, and so I know sometimes that can be a lot to manage when you have the younger siblings causing distractions and things. So how should you, as the homeschool parent, make sure that you are staying on track with your child who's in school, but still meeting the needs of all of your kids?
My biggest advice with little ones is that the little ones go first. So I always read to the youngest first, and they got that special time to feel like they were focused on and had lots of attention. And that then when I set them down or put them wherever I was putting them or let them play, that they were not neglected. They weren't trying as hard to get mommy's attention because they'd had it. And so then I could move on to read to the others at a higher level. And I also involved olders reading to youngers quite a bit, so that would keep youngers involved and feel it was a help to me that they would do that. And then they're learning as they do it, as they read aloud to the younger ones. So those were things. There's no law about when you have to read. So if nap time, was the best time to do school, then that's when you do school. So there, and play around with different things as to what works. I only ever had one rule, and this was actually something from the preschool, the 3-year-old, the 3 and 4-year-old, there was an advice in there about that they just needed not to be making noise, but they were gaining so much, even, if they're hearing it, even if they're playing or drawing or whatever. So that was our rule. You just couldn't make noise when mommy was reading, but you could do other things. So that also helped with the little bitties, that they could move around and play and whatnot, just not be loud. So I probably will come and things will pop in as we keep talking about it, because it has been a little while, but since I had teeny tinies. But nap time and snack time were great schooling times. So
yeah, absolutely. Working around those nap times was, I don't see any other way to accomplish a lot of the things that need to get done over the course of the day. And I think as a parent, you, in your family, in your home, you have a rhythm, just a natural rhythm, and the younger children are going to have a natural time when they're, slightly more rambunctious or more needy, or again, the nap time or the snack time, those types of things, especially that snack time, I think, or lunchtime, all the meal times, when their mouths are full, it's a great opportunity for you to go ahead and get a lot of the reading done. Even to them, even while they're eating. That's fine. Or working with the older kiddos. And also I like to have a special toy for the little one that she was, that was the only time that she could use that toy, or puzzle or game or something like that, Legos or blocks or things like that, that are not too loud, that were occupying for her, so that we could do some school with my older two. So it's just a matter of finding the rhythms, I think, in your life, and finding the things that the younger one, that they're going to occupy the younger one for any period of time, so that you can get some things done with the olders.
Yeah, I agree with both of those. My kids are 5 years apart. So my daughter was already at that kindergarten age when my son was born. And so I actually discovered baby wearing at that point and would carry him around on my chest or my back while I was teaching her. And he would stay happy because he thought I was holding him like all day long. But then I was able to really focus on her when he was a baby. And then as he got older, he kind of knew, like, mommy's doing something with my sister right now. And so he kind of learned that. I think even small kids kind of learn what the routine is. And he knew that, okay, once I explained her math assignment to her, then I would come in and play with him or give him whatever he needed. There was a point too where he went to like a little half-day daycare preschool program because he was just so loud and so distracting that I would then knock out everything with my daughter. He did that for about a year, until she was also at a point too that she could become more independent and had kind of her little stack of things she could do on her own. So that way, if he was just very much a babbler and, would be making a lot of noise, then she could go work on those things in a different room. I love what you guys said about when they were eating. That was something I had to do once my son was to that school age of, while he's eating, he's in the room with me. He's not going anywhere. He's not making a lot of noise. And he was able to focus better and listen to what I was saying when I started teaching him, because he was in his high chair or in his booster. So let's talk a little bit about that when the kid you're trying to teach is the one that's wiggling or having those focus issues, or maybe you've just read the whole page to them and they can't tell you anything that was on it. I discovered this with my creative child, that he would be creating things in his own mind and not actually listening to me. He was tuning me out. So when it comes to issues like that, how do you kind of get a handle on those and help the kids still learn and pay attention when that's kind of a new idea to them?
I think sometimes, sometimes proximity works. Gather the kid next to you as opposed to, on the carpet or at the table while you're on the couch. Having the child right next to me has always seemed to work really well for my children. And then if it was a fiddler, I would have something that she could fiddle with, there on the couch, a little doll or something. But if it was too distracting, and there wasn't any comprehension or attention paid, then that had to go. And so it's a matter of you assessing as you're going. Instead of reading the entire chapter and then say, hey, what was the character doing here at this point? Read smaller sections and then do some assessing at those intervals, smaller intervals, so that there is a little bit more focus. I found that those types of things worked here. If there was a child, I would say that most of all of my children are pretty good at listening, even though it doesn't seem like they're listening. They're picking up quite a bit more than I would think they are. And so my kids, I did allow for them to be playing with the Legos or the blocks if it was not loud, and if they were able to either answer some comprehension questions or retell, some sections of the story to me.
All true of my home as well. Really. Now I had my second child would not, when we would finish reading, she would not answer questions. Mm-hmm. She hated to be asked questions. But I would see within that next week, some book that we'd read, all of the characters for her dolls are now named what we'd read last week. She heard it. She knew, she was comprehending it. It just wasn't how she engaged, right? It wasn't how she interacted. So, that was fine. I could tell she was getting it. I knew that she would act out scenes. She's getting it. So I think being open to, your child may communicate some of those things in a different way based on their bent, is a good thing to be aware of. And then certainly there are some that are struggling with comprehension. And if they really are, well, you need to address that and pay attention. But a lot of times their expressions are just a little bit different of how they're getting it.
Well, and that's such a great point too, that the instructor's guide includes all the comprehension questions, but sometimes asking those questions either at the end of the chapter or, even as you go along, that may not be what that child understands. I know I discovered that with my son when I was like, oh, what did so-and-so do? And he goes, who's so-and-so? And we're halfway through the book. And I'm like, how do you not know who so-and-so is? And so I said, okay, what did I just read about? He could tell me the whole story. He knew the little boy. He just didn't know his name. So a lot of times, the comprehension questions, if the child doesn't seem to get those and you ask them, okay, well, what did you hear me say? They can tell you what's going on in the story. They know those characters. Or Amy, like you said, it may not even look like they're paying attention, but then there they are acting out what they just heard in the last week or something. So sometimes you kind of have to play around with, how does this child learn? And I know my two children learn very, very differently. And so we kind of have changed some things the second time. Another thing, because my son is super creative, he will be off in his creative playland sometimes. And so if we allow him to play with Legos or blocks or another toy, he has to build what's happening in the story, because then he will focus on it. Versus my daughter, she could be playing the whole time and she's still hearing everything, because she's less creative. She doesn't have all of the things happening in her own internal dialogue. I think that, she's thinking of other stories. So that's something you kind of learn with the kids. Another thing is that your child does not have to sit down to listen or do any of their work. Both of my kids do very well on like an exercise ball or standing at the counter when they write. I mean, as long as they are able to do their work, I think it's important to remember that when you homeschool, you don't have to have them sitting down even on the couch. I mean, they can be moving around, standing. I know I like to work at a standing desk myself as an adult. So why do we expect kids to sit the whole day? So yeah, just kind of play around with it and see, how does your child pick up on that? How do they engage? Maybe read the comprehension questions to them before you start reading. That way they know what to look out for and what types of information you're going to ask. So yeah, just playing around and realize that every child is different, I think is super helpful. But let's go ahead and talk to you about like the daily tasks or chores, basic things like that. In Sonlight's newer preschool and pre-K, we've really incorporated those Montessori activities in, where they learn how to, cut things or do basic chores. But what's a good way to keep that going in elementary school and just kind of make it part of the day and the family environment while everybody's there at home?
I think one of the great things about being able to have some extra time in terms of being all together as a family is you're able to know what their interests are, I think, a little bit easier. And so we can do a lot more of an interest-led type of a learning. And so if you've got a kiddo that likes baking or cooking or crafts, I mean, those are really great ways to incorporate, obviously measuring and chemistry and science and manipulating things and fine motor skills and those types of things. So I think that being able to go along with their interests is going to obviously make things much more interesting for them. And then I always liked to choose a child, like a kind of a rotating 3-day a week. So one child is going to help with the dinner this day, and then the next child the next day, and the next child the next day. Because not only are we spending a little bit of one-on-one time, we're practicing a lot of life skills, and we're getting the chores done. So same thing goes for almost all, of your household chores, whether it's yard work or any of those things. I like to do it on a one-on-one basis as much as possible, because most other things are a family, well, at least myself and the kids. And so we can be one-on-one, can get a little one-on-one attention, and we're focused a little bit more perhaps, and just getting some of those things done. Cutting the snacks for lunch, or all of those things kids can be involved in at some level at home.
And I love that, working one-on-one with them, because that's what my big advice with chores is, that children like for you to work with them. They want to work with you. They love working with you. It's when you send them off to do it by themselves that they buck the system. So I think working alongside them and doing what you can to make it fun, even when it's not fun for you, but your attitude goes so far with making it a better environment for them. And and for you, I think if you can push your own attitude and help them to have one, it will pay off in the long run. I'm also a chores in the morning, get some things done first off, because that just sets the tone of, we have things we need to do and work to do, and you do that, and, work with school and whatnot. And then you get time, because you've done that, you may have some time in the afternoon, you get all to yourself, right? To do the thing you want to do. And then I'm big on doing chores before dinner. Usually there's something else that has to be done. And so kind of a quick pickup or clean up from something that needs to be done, or preparation for dinner, those kind of things, and getting them involved, so that most of us now, if you have a husband that's coming, that works from home, you no longer have the daddy's coming home, and so we got to get ready. He's always there, but which is our situation. But we still kind of, clean up before dinner and that kind of thing still is a good setting that some, just daily things that need to be done at appropriate times.
Yeah, I think too often as parents, we just want to do everything. And then one day we look at an older child and say, okay, go do this. And we realize we've never actually taught them how to do that. So I think when you're already homeschooling, it becomes a little more natural to, oh, you're with me right now. Do you want to help me make lunch? And then, by the time they're a little bit older, now they can make, sandwiches on their own, or whatever it is, that you were working on when they were younger. And then they become independent and develop those skills as they get older, whether it's cooking, cleaning, running errands with you, those types of things. So yeah, I absolutely agree. I think when you've got the kids there anyway, invite them to help you. And that way you can really teach them, well, this is how I do this, and oh, you missed that spot. Let's try this again, make it fun. And then that way, as they get a little bit older, then you can say, go clean your room before you come downstairs for school. And they're not just looking at a mess and not sure what to do. So yeah, I agree. I'm a big proponent of, do basic chores in the morning. I am a neat person naturally. And so if my space is messy, it just sets me off for the whole day versus, okay, let's get things picked up. And now school is relaxing because there's not a mess all over the living room floor, whatever it may be. So love to do that, especially with elementary kids, because they're at a really helpful, fun age for that. But let's talk too about keeping the school part fun, or how do you really instill and develop that love of learning? I think this is something that's so easy with Sonlight, but what are some ideas, to make that fun so that your kids really do fall in love with learning at that early age?
I love a good field trip to to bring something, that like almost as a reward for some of the things that we've read about to keep things fun. I mean, I think the Sonlight books are so fun. We have so much fun just reading them that that's a gimme. It really is pretty easy that way to either we're laughing about something or crying about something because it was moving, and all of those things add to the enjoyment, overall of doing those things. But F is not elementary, but just as an example, with the F History Bible Literature program for Sonlight, we were studying about a bunch of different countries. So we went to as authentic a restaurant as we could that served food from that country. And my kids, that was their favorite year. They loved eating all over town. That kept it fun. But things like that. I mean, when we were studying American history, I tried to, if we couldn't actually go somewhere, we might look at pictures of that place online, or, but just exploring more deeply the thing that we're reading about. If you can do something in person, even better, or celebrate, I know we're not supposed to be advocating movies, right? But maybe that was something. Hey, we finished this, and so we're going to celebrate by watching the movie of that, if it was a good representation of the time that we'd done. So on occasion, saving one of the books to do, because we were going to go on a driving trip and we could listen to that book maybe all together, so that Daddy could be incorporated in it as well, would make it a little different and fun.
Yeah, I was going to say that exactly about the movies. So many of the books in the elementary grades are are adapted to a movie. And so that would be something to look forward to at the end of the book, was that we would spend a Friday afternoon and, gather together with popcorn and snacks and watch the movie. And then the other thing is that, like Amy said, and it's a given, that Sonlight makes it just about as easy and pleasant as it can possibly be, because we are sitting on the couch for the big chunk of the day, reading together, learning together, having discussions about the things that we're learning, together. Not, oh, well, let me have a discussion with this one and then I'll read this and have a discussion with that one. It's together for the majority of the day, instead of, at the table working on worksheets, again, drill and kill, because there just is very little in terms of a written output that can seem daunting to a child. Even the written output that we do incorporate is extremely doable, and it's not an overkill of a situation on a day-to-day basis. So truly, I can't imagine a curriculum that is going to make it more fun, more engaging, more of a relaxed home life, truly, because it's a large chunk of our life is using the curriculum. And so the fact that it is so pleasurable, it just makes it just as easy as it could be.
Yeah, I agree. I love to use the books as a jumping off point. Like Amy, when you said cooking your way through F, we did the same and tried all the different foods. Another thing, my son loves to get on YouTube and watch just like random people's vacation videos of them walking around in the place that we've read about. Something about like seeing what it looks like now, seeing these buildings, hearing people speaking in different languages, if it's set in a different country. I mean, all of that, he just loves that. So we use YouTube a lot. We've also done the movies. Let's compare the movie to the book we just read and see how similar or different they are. But I think being home and homeschooling and seeing, your kids will see you get excited by things. They will see you be moved by books, and they don't have classmates, criticizing their love of that story, or, saying, oh, well, that's not cool or whatever, and so I found my kids, even from an early age, if I got into something, they also got into it. And it's so fun now that they're a little bit older to go to museums, because they get just as excited and engaged in whatever we're learning about as like their dad and I would. So yeah, I think you have a really unique opportunity when you homeschool to instill that love of learning in them, because they see you also getting excited or learning new things. Like I said, I learned so much in reading stuff to them, and oh, I didn't know that. And I think they find that kind of fun too. Like, oh, mommy's an adult and she didn't even know that, all of those things. So yeah, Sonlight makes it super fun, super easy, I think, to just incorporate those things in your daily life. And ladies, I really appreciate you both being here and sharing your experiences with us. For anyone watching that, is new to this whole homeschool thing, or not sure what to do, again, I encourage you to join the Sonlight Connections community in the app and on Facebook. Or if you need more specific help, reach out to one of our advisors. But there's so many resources and so many great ideas that you get from other Sonlight parents and from our mentors and advisors, that could really help you out and walk along with you on this homeschool journey. So thank you so much, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you.